Rebecca Martinez had always been the type of person who preferred to blend into the background. At 34, she worked as a night shift janitor at Pinnacle Financial Corp., one of the city's most prestigious banking institutions. Her shift started at 10 p.m. and ended at 6 a.m., cleaning the offices of executives who made more in a month than she did in a year. She never complained, never caused trouble, and always did her job with quiet efficiency. The building's security supervisor, Marcus Thompson, was a different story entirely. A former mall cop who had somehow worked his way up to overseeing security for the entire 40-story building, Marcus had developed a reputation for being unnecessarily harsh with the cleaning staff. He seemed to take particular pleasure in making their lives difficult, especially the women. Rebecca had heard the stories from other janitors about his inappropriate comments, his tendency to follow female employees around the building, and his habit of making them uncomfortable with his lingering stares. For 3 years, Rebecca had managed to avoid most of Marcus's attention. She kept her head down, wore loose-fitting clothes, and tried to stay invisible. Her uniform consisted of baggy navy blue coveralls that concealed her figure, and she always kept her long black hair pulled back in a tight bun. She had learned that the best way to survive in this job was to remain unremarkable. But everything changed on a humid Tuesday night in July. Rebecca was cleaning the executive conference room on the 32nd floor when Marcus appeared in the doorway. He was a large man, standing over 6 feet tall with a beer belly that strained against his security uniform. His thinning hair was combed over his bald spot, and his small eyes always seemed to be calculating something unpleasant. "Martinez," he said, his voice carrying that familiar tone of authority mixed with something darker. "I need to talk to you." Rebecca continued polishing the mahogany conference table, not looking up. "I'm almost finished with this room, Mr. Thompson. Can it wait until I'm done?" "No, it can't wait." Marcus stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. The sound of the door clicking shut made Rebecca's stomach clench with anxiety. "I've been getting reports about you." This was news to Rebecca. In 3 years, she had never received a single complaint about her work. She was meticulous, punctual, and professional. Reports about what? Marcus walked around the table, positioning himself between Rebecca and the door. "Reports that you've been stealing from the offices. Small things. Pens, sticky notes, maybe some loose change left on desks." Rebecca's heart began to race. "That's not true. I would never steal anything." "Well, that's what we're going to find out." Marcus pulled out his phone and began scrolling through something. "Company policy states that if there's suspicion of theft, security has the right to conduct a search. And I'm suspicious, Martinez, very suspicious." The accusation hit Rebecca like a physical blow. She had never stolen so much as a paper clip from this building. Her integrity was one of the few things she had left to be proud of. "You can search my cart, my supplies, even my purse. I have nothing to hide." Marcus smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Oh, I intend to be thorough, very thorough. In fact, I'm going to need you to remove your coveralls so I can make sure you're not hiding anything underneath." Rebecca's blood ran cold. "Excuse me." "You heard me. Company policy allows for strip searches when theft is suspected. I need to make sure you're not concealing stolen property on your person." The room felt like it was spinning. Rebecca gripped the edge of the conference table to steady herself. "That's not legal. That's not right. I want to call my supervisor." "I am your supervisor when it comes to security matters," Marcus said, his voice becoming more aggressive. "And I'm telling you to remove your coveralls. Now." Rebecca's mind raced. She needed this job. Her elderly mother depended on her income for her medication and care. Her younger brother was in college, and she was helping with his tuition. She couldn't afford to lose this position, but she also couldn't let this man humiliate her. "I want a witness," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus laughed. "At this time of night? It's just you and me in this building, Martinez. The other security guards are monitoring the lobby. So what's it going to be?" Rebecca realized she was trapped. She was alone in a building with a man who clearly had bad intentions, and he was using his position of authority to intimidate her. Her hands shook as she reached for the zipper of her coveralls. Please," she whispered, "this isn't right." "Just do it, Martinez. The sooner you cooperate, the sooner we can all go home." With tears forming in her eyes, Rebecca slowly unzipped her coveralls. She tried to think of her mother, of her brother, of all the people depending on her. She couldn't afford to lose this job, no matter how degrading this moment was. As the coveralls fell to the floor, Marcus's eyes widened in shock. But it wasn't because of what he had expected to see. It was because of what he hadn't expected to see. Rebecca stood in the conference room wearing a simple white tank top and dark jeans. But it was the tattoo on her left shoulder that made Marcus's face drain of color. The tattoo was intricate and unmistakable. The emblem of the United States Marine Corps, surrounded by dates and coordinates that told a story of service and sacrifice. But more than that, it was the smaller tattoo just below the Marine emblem that made Marcus take a step backward. It was a simple phrase in black ink: "Semper Fi Force Recon." Marcus stared at the tattoo, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Force Reconnaissance was an elite unit within the Marines, known for their specialized training in combat, intelligence gathering, and survival. These weren't ordinary soldiers. They were among the most highly trained warriors in the military. "You can put your coveralls back on," Marcus said quietly. his entire demeanor changing in an instant. Rebecca bent down to retrieve her uniform, her hands still shaking, but now from anger rather than fear. As she zipped up her coveralls, she looked directly at Marcus for the first time since entering the room. "Is the search complete?" she asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. Marcus nodded, unable to meet her eyes. Yeah, it's complete. You can go back to work." But Rebecca wasn't finished. So no stolen property was found. No, nothing was found. And there won't be any more random searches based on anonymous reports. Marcus shook his head vigorously. No, no more searches. Rebecca picked up her cleaning supplies and walked toward the door. As she reached for the handle, she turned back to look at Marcus one more time. "Mr. Thompson, I want you to know that I remember everything about tonight. Every word, every action, every moment. I hope you remember it too." Then she was gone, leaving Marcus alone in the conference room with the realization that he had just made a terrible mistake. He had assumed Rebecca was just another vulnerable cleaning lady he could intimidate and humiliate. He had no idea that beneath her quiet exterior was someone who had survived combat in Afghanistan, someone who had been trained to handle situations far more dangerous than a corrupt security supervisor. As Rebecca continued her rounds through the building, her mind was already working on a plan. She had endured worse things than Marcus Thompson during her 3 tour overseas, and she had learned something important during her time in the Marines. Sometimes the best revenge comes from patience and careful planning. The next morning, Rebecca sat in her small apartment, staring at her laptop screen. She had been home for 2 hours, but she hadn't slept. Instead, she had been researching. She had looked up Pinnacle Financial Corp's employee handbook, their corporate policies, and their leadership structure. She had also done some digging into Marcus Thompson's background. What she found was interesting. Marcus had been hired 5 years ago, despite having no formal security training beyond his stint as a mall security guard. He had gotten the job through a connection with the building's property manager, Harold Kramer. But more importantly, she discovered that there had been complaints about Marcus before. 3 female employees had filed reports about inappropriate behavior, but somehow those complaints had never resulted in any disciplinary action. Rebecca pulled up her own employee file, which she had access to through the company's internal system. Her record was spotless. Perfect attendance, no complaints, no disciplinary actions, no safety violations. She had been a model employee for 3 years. She then accessed the building's security logs from the previous night. According to the official record, Marcus had been stationed in the lobby from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. There was no mention of any security sweeps, no record of any theft investigations, and no documentation of any searches conducted on the 32nd floor. Rebecca smiled grimly. Marcus had been so confident in his authority that he hadn't even bothered to cover his tracks properly. He had assumed that Rebecca would be too intimidated to report what had happened, and he had assumed that even if she did report it, no one would believe her word over his. He had made a serious error in judgment. Rebecca opened a new document on her laptop and began typing. She started with a detailed account of the previous night's events, including exact times, locations, and conversations. She described Marcus's behavior, his accusations, his demand that she remove her clothing, and his complete lack of proper procedure or documentation. But this wasn't going to be a simple complaint filed with human resources. Rebecca had learned during her military service that sometimes you had to be strategic about how you fought your battles. She needed to gather more evidence, build a stronger case, and find allies who could support her claims. Over the next several days, Rebecca began talking to other employees. She was careful and discreet, but she started asking questions about Marcus's behavior. She spoke with other members of the cleaning staff, the night security guards, and even some of the day shift employees who had interactions with Marcus. The stories she heard were disturbing. Marcus had a pattern of targeting female employees, particularly those who were older, minorities, or immigrants. He seemed to choose women who he perceived as vulnerable or unlikely to fight back. Rebecca heard about inappropriate comments, unwanted touching, and other incidents of harassment that had gone unreported because the victims were afraid of losing their jobs. One story particularly stood out. A woman named Carmen Rodriguez had worked as a janitor in the building for 7 years. She told Rebecca about an incident 6 months earlier when Marcus had cornered her in a supply closet and demanded that she lift her shirt to prove she hadn't stolen a calculator that had gone missing from an office. "I was so scared," Carmen explained in hushed tones as they worked together on the 15th floor. "He said he would have me fired if I didn't cooperate, so I did what he asked. But the calculator was never missing. One of the executives had just moved it to a different desk." Rebecca's anger grew with each story she heard. Marcus was a predator who was using his position of authority to victimize women who had little power to defend themselves. He had created a climate of fear and intimidation, and he had gotten away with it because his victims were afraid to speak up. But Rebecca was different. She had been trained to fight back, and she knew how to use the system to her advantage. She also knew that sometimes the best way to defeat an enemy was to make them defeat themselves. On Friday night, Rebecca was cleaning the 28th floor when she saw Marcus approaching. Her heart rate increased slightly, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from anticipation. "Martinez," Marcus said, his voice noticeably less aggressive than it had been on Tuesday night. "How's everything going?" Rebecca continued vacuuming, forcing him to raise his voice to be heard over the noise. "Everything's fine, Mr. Thompson." Marcus stood awkwardly in the hallway, clearly wanting to say something but unsure how to proceed. Finally, he walked closer and gestured for her to turn off the vacuum. "Look, about the other night," he began, his eyes darting around nervously. "I want you to know that what happened was just standard procedure, nothing personal." Rebecca nodded calmly. "I understand. You were just doing your job." Marcus seemed relieved by her response. "Exactly. Sometimes we have to do things that seem harsh, but it's all about maintaining security in the building. I'm sure you understand that, given your background." So he had been thinking about her tattoo. Rebecca kept her expression neutral. "Of course, security is important." "Right. And I want you to know that I don't anticipate any more issues. Your work has been satisfactory, and I don't expect any more problems." Rebecca tilted her head slightly, as if considering his words. "What kind of problems were you expecting?" Marcus's face flushed slightly. "I just meant, theft issues, anonymous reports, that sort of thing." "Oh, I see. And if there were more anonymous reports, would there be more searches?" Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "Well, that would depend on the situation. But like I said, I don't anticipate any more issues." Rebecca smiled pleasantly. "That's good to hear. I'd hate for there to be any misunderstandings about company policy." There was something in her tone that made Marcus nervous, though he couldn't quite put his finger on what it was. "Right. Well, I should let you get back to work." As Marcus walked away, Rebecca plugged the vacuum back in and returned to her cleaning. But her mind was already several steps ahead. She had just confirmed something important. Marcus was worried about what she might do with the information about Tuesday night. He was trying to smooth things over, which meant he knew he had crossed a line. That weekend, Rebecca made a decision that would change everything. She drove to the public library and spent several hours researching employment law, particularly as it related to workplace harassment and illegal searches. She also looked up information about the building's parent company, Pinnacle Financial Corp., and their corporate structure. What she discovered was that Pinnacle Financial had been involved in several high-profile harassment lawsuits in recent years. The company had paid out millions in settlements, and they had implemented new policies and training programs to prevent future incidents. More importantly, they had established a confidential hotline for reporting harassment and discrimination. Rebecca also learned that the building where she worked was actually owned by a separate property management company called Prestige Properties. Harold Kramer, who had hired Marcus, was the on-site property manager, but he reported to a regional manager named Victoria Chen, who in turn reported to the company's corporate headquarters in Chicago. This gave Rebecca an idea. Instead of filing a complaint with Pinnacle Financial's HR department, she could go directly to the property management company. This would put pressure on them to investigate Marcus's behavior, and it would also create a paper trail that couldn't be easily buried by Harold Kramer. On Monday morning, Rebecca called the corporate headquarters of Prestige Properties. She was transferred several times before finally reaching Victoria Chen's office. "Ms. Chen's office, this is Janet speaking. How can I help you?" "I'd like to report a serious incident involving employee misconduct at one of your properties," Rebecca said, keeping her voice calm and professional. "I see. Can you provide me with some details about the nature of the incident?" Rebecca had prepared for this question. "I'm an employee at the Pinnacle Financial building downtown. I was subjected to an illegal search by the security supervisor, Marcus Thompson. The search involved forced removal of clothing and was conducted without proper documentation or witnesses." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I'm sorry, can you repeat that? Did you say forced removal of clothing?" "Yes. I was accused of theft without evidence and forced to remove my work coveralls during what was supposedly a security search. No stolen property was found, and no report was filed." "Oh my God, hold on one moment, please." Rebecca was placed on hold for nearly 5 minutes. When Janet returned, her voice was noticeably more serious. "Ms. Chen would like to speak with you personally. Can you hold for just a moment?" When Victoria Chen came on the line, her voice was crisp and professional. "This is Victoria Chen. I understand you're calling about a serious incident involving one of our security supervisors." "Yes, ma'am. My name is Rebecca Martinez. I'm a janitor at the Pinnacle Financial building, and I was subjected to what I believe was an illegal search by Marcus Thompson, the security supervisor." "Can you provide me with the details of what happened?" Rebecca had rehearsed this conversation, and she delivered her account clearly and concisely. She included dates, times, locations, and exact quotes from her conversation with Marcus. She also mentioned the lack of proper documentation and the absence of witnesses. When she finished, Victoria Chen was quiet for a long moment. "Ms. Martinez, what you're describing is completely unacceptable. If these allegations are true, this represents a serious violation of company policy and potentially criminal behavior." "I understand that, ma'am. I'm not looking to cause trouble, but I felt it was important to report what happened." "You absolutely did the right thing. Now, I need to ask you some questions for our investigation. Are you comfortable proceeding with a formal complaint?" Rebecca took a deep breath. "Yes, ma'am, I am." "Excellent. I'm going to connect you with our corporate security director, James Sullivan. He'll be handling the investigation personally. In the meantime, I want you to know that we take these allegations very seriously, and there will be no retaliation against you for coming forward. When James Sullivan came on the line, his first question caught Rebecca off guard. "Ms. Martinez, I need to ask you something directly. Are you planning to involve law enforcement or an attorney in this matter?" Rebecca considered her answer carefully. "Not at this time. I'm hoping this can be resolved through proper channels." "I appreciate that. Now, I need to let you know that what you've described could constitute sexual harassment, assault, and potentially criminal conduct. We're going to investigate this thoroughly, but I want you to understand that this investigation may result in criminal charges against Mr. Thompson." "I understand." "Good. Now, I'm going to need you to provide a written statement detailing everything that happened. I'm also going to need you to preserve any evidence you might have, including your work uniform from that night." Rebecca's heart raced. She had washed her coveralls, but she still had them. "I can do that." "Excellent. I'm going to be on site tomorrow morning to begin the investigation. I'll need to interview you in person, and I'll also be interviewing other employees about Mr. Thompson's behavior. Can you meet with me at 9 a.m.?" "Yes, sir." "One more thing, Ms. Martinez. I want you to know that this investigation will be conducted with complete confidentiality. Mr. Thompson will not be informed about the specific allegations until we've completed our interviews. Your safety and job security are our top priorities." After hanging up, Rebecca sat in her apartment feeling a mixture of relief and anxiety. She had set something in motion that couldn't be stopped, and she wasn't sure where it would lead. But she knew she had done the right thing. The next morning, Rebecca arrived at the Pinnacle Financial Building at 9 a.m. sharp. She was directed to a conference room on the third floor, where she met James Sullivan for the first time. He was a tall, distinguished man in his 50s with graying hair and kind eyes. He was accompanied by a woman who introduced herself as Lisa Park, the company's legal counsel. "Ms. Martinez, thank you for coming in," James said, gesturing for her to take a seat. "I want you to know that we've already begun our investigation, and we take your allegations very seriously." Over the next 2 hours, Rebecca provided a detailed account of what had happened on Tuesday night. She was asked to describe every aspect of the encounter, from Marcus's initial accusation to his demand that she remove her clothing. She was also asked about her observations of Marcus's behavior toward other employees. Lisa Park took extensive notes and asked several pointed questions about company policy and proper procedures. "Ms. Martinez, in your 3 years of employment, have you ever been subjected to a security search?" "No, never." "And are you familiar with the building's security protocols?" I've never seen any written policies about searches, but I know that any disciplinary actions are supposed to be documented and reported to HR. James Sullivan leaned forward. Ms. Martinez, I need to ask you something that might seem personal, but it's important for our investigation. You mentioned that Mr. Thompson's behavior changed after you removed your coveralls. Can you explain what you think caused that change? Rebecca had been expecting this question. I have a tattoo on my shoulder that indicates my military service. Specifically, it shows that I served in force reconnaissance with the Marines. Both investigators exchanged glances. Lisa Park made a note. And you believe Mr. Thompson's recognition of your military background influenced his behavior. I believe he realized that I wasn't the type of person he could intimidate without consequences. James Sullivan nodded thoughtfully. That's a very important observation. Now, I need to ask you about other employees. Have you spoken with anyone else about this incident? Rebecca had prepared for this question as well. I've had general conversations with other employees about workplace safety and security procedures. In the course of those conversations, I've learned that other women have had uncomfortable interactions with Mr. Thompson. Can you provide us with names? Rebecca hesitated. She didn't want to betray the confidence of her coworkers, but she also knew that their stories could be crucial to the investigation. I'd prefer that you speak with them directly. I don't want to put words in their mouths. Lisa Park nodded approvingly. That's very professional of you. We'll be conducting interviews with all employees who work in the building. The interview concluded with James Sullivan explaining the next steps of the investigation. Ms. Martinez, we're going to be conducting interviews over the next several days. We'll also be reviewing security footage, employment records, and any other relevant documentation. In the meantime, I want you to continue your normal work schedule. But if you have any concerns about your safety, or if Mr. Thompson approaches you about this matter, you should contact me immediately. Rebecca returned to work that night feeling cautiously optimistic. She had taken the first step in holding Marcus accountable for his behavior, and the investigation seemed to be moving forward professionally and thoroughly. But she also knew that the real test would come when Marcus discovered what was happening. Men like Marcus didn't give up their power easily, and she suspected that things might get worse before they got better. She was right. On Wednesday night, Rebecca was cleaning the executive offices on the 40th floor when she heard the elevator doors open. She looked up to see Marcus walking toward her, and immediately she could tell that something had changed. His face was flushed with anger, and his movements were more aggressive than usual. "Martinez," he said, his voice carrying a dangerous edge, "I think it's time we had another conversation." Rebecca continued cleaning, but her senses were heightened. She was aware of every exit, every potential weapon, every advantage she might have if the situation escalated. Her military training had taught her to assess threats quickly and respond accordingly. "I'm listening," she said calmly. Marcus positioned himself between Rebecca and the elevator, cutting off her most direct escape route. "I hear you've been talking to people, spreading stories, making accusations." Rebecca didn't look up from her work. "I'm not sure what you mean." "Don't play dumb with me, Martinez. I know you've been talking to corporate. I know you've been trying to cause trouble." Now Rebecca did look up, meeting his eyes directly. "Mr. Thompson, if you have concerns about my work performance, you should discuss them with my supervisor." Marcus's face grew redder. "Your supervisor? Lady, I am your supervisor when it comes to security matters. And I'm telling you right now that if you don't stop this nonsense, you're going to find yourself out of a job." Rebecca set down her cleaning supplies and stood up to her full height. At 5 feet 6 inches, she was considerably shorter than Marcus, but her posture conveyed confidence and strength. "Are you threatening me, Mr. Thompson?" "I'm warning you, you're messing with the wrong person." Rebecca smiled slightly, and something in that smile made Marcus take a step backward. "Actually, Mr. Thompson, I think you're the one who messed with the wrong person." The two stood facing each other for a long moment. Marcus was clearly trying to intimidate her, but Rebecca's calm demeanor seemed to be having the opposite effect. She wasn't cowering or apologizing or backing down. If anything, she seemed to be enjoying the confrontation. "You think you're tough because you were in the military," Marcus said, his voice rising. "You think that gives you the right to cause trouble here." "I think my military service taught me the difference between legitimate authority and abuse of power," Rebecca replied evenly. "And I think you've confused the two." Marcus's hands clenched into fists. "You little—" "Be very careful about what you say next," Rebecca interrupted, her voice still calm but with an unmistakable warning. "Because I'm pretty sure that conversation is being recorded." Marcus looked around the office, suddenly aware that there were security cameras positioned throughout the building. He hadn't thought about the fact that this confrontation was likely being captured on video. "This isn't over," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "No," Rebecca agreed. "It's not over, but I don't think it's going to end the way you expect." Marcus turned and walked back toward the elevator, his shoulders tense with frustration. As the doors closed behind him, Rebecca pulled out her phone and sent a text message to James Sullivan. "Mr. Thompson just confronted me about the investigation. He made threats about my job and became aggressive. The conversation took place on the 40th floor around 11:30 p.m. There should be security footage." The response came back within minutes. "Are you safe? Do you need security escort? Rebecca typed back, I'm fine, continuing with my work schedule as planned. But she knew that Marcus had just made another crucial mistake. By confronting her about the investigation, he had confirmed that he knew about the complaint and that he was attempting to intimidate her into dropping it. By doing so in front of security cameras, he had provided additional evidence of his inappropriate behavior. The next morning, Rebecca received a call from James Sullivan asking her to come in for another interview. When she arrived at the building, she was surprised to find Harold Kramer, the property manager, waiting in the conference room along with Sullivan and Lisa Park. Ms. Martinez, Harold said, standing to shake her hand. I want to apologize for what you've been through. I had no idea that this type of behavior was occurring in my building. Rebecca studied Harold's face, trying to determine if he was being genuine or if this was damage control. Thank you, Mr. Kramer. James Sullivan opened a folder and pulled out several printed pages. Ms. Martinez, we've been reviewing security footage from the building, and we've discovered some very disturbing patterns. We've identified at least 6 incidents over the past year where Mr. Thompson engaged in inappropriate behavior with female employees. Rebecca's eyes widened. 6 incidents. Yes, and that's just what we've found on video. We suspect there may be more incidents that occurred in areas without camera coverage. Lisa Park leaned forward. Ms. Martinez, I need to ask you directly. Are you interested in pursuing legal action against Mr. Thompson and the company? Rebecca considered the question carefully. What I'm interested in is making sure this doesn't happen to anyone else. If that requires legal action, then yes, I'm prepared to pursue it. Harold Kramer shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Ms. Martinez, I want to assure you that we're taking immediate action. Mr. Thompson has been suspended pending the outcome of the investigation. We're also implementing new security protocols and training programs to prevent future incidents. What about the other women who were affected? Rebecca asked. Are they being offered support? James Sullivan nodded. We're reaching out to every employee who may have been impacted by Mr. Thompson's behavior. We're offering counseling services, and we're conducting a comprehensive review of our security procedures. Rebecca felt a sense of satisfaction at hearing this news. Her decision to come forward was already having a positive impact on other employees. There's one more thing, Lisa Park said. We've discovered that Mr. Thompson has been filing false reports about employee theft. In the past year, he's made allegations against 12 different employees, all of them women, all of them minorities or immigrants. In every case, the allegations were unsubstantiated, and no disciplinary action was taken against the employees. Rebecca's anger flared. So he's been targeting vulnerable women and using false accusations to justify harassment. That's exactly what he's been doing, James Sullivan confirmed. And your decision to come forward has exposed a pattern of behavior that we might never have discovered otherwise. The meeting concluded with Rebecca being assured that the investigation would continue and that she would be kept informed of any developments. She was also told that she would be receiving a formal apology from the company's corporate headquarters, along with assurances that there would be no retaliation against her. As Rebecca left the building, she felt a mixture of emotions. She was relieved that the investigation was proceeding, but she was also angry that Marcus had been allowed to terrorize female employees for so long. She was glad that she had the courage to come forward, but she was frustrated that it had taken someone with her background to finally stand up to him. That evening, Rebecca returned to work to find that the atmosphere in the building had changed dramatically. Word had spread among the employees about the investigation, and several women approached her to express their gratitude for her courage in coming forward. Carmen Rodriguez, the woman who had told Rebecca about her own encounter with Marcus, was particularly emotional. "I never thought anyone would believe me," she said, tears in her eyes. "I was so ashamed about what happened, but seeing you stand up to him, it made me realize that it wasn't my fault." Rebecca hugged the older woman gently. "It was never your fault, Carmen. None of it was any of our faults." Over the next several days, Rebecca watched as the investigation unfolded. More employees came forward with their own stories about Marcus's behavior. Security footage was reviewed, and additional evidence was gathered. The scope of Marcus's misconduct became clearer with each passing day. But Rebecca also learned something that made her even more angry. Harold Kramer had known about at least some of Marcus's behavior. 2 employees had filed complaints with him about Marcus's inappropriate conduct, but those complaints had been dismissed as misunderstandings or personality conflicts. This revelation led to Harold Kramer's suspension as well. The company brought in an external property management firm to oversee the building, while they conducted a complete review of their operations. A week after the investigation began, Rebecca received a phone call from James Sullivan. "Ms. Martinez, I wanted to give you an update on the investigation. We've concluded our interviews and evidence gathering, and we're prepared to move forward with formal charges against Mr. Thompson." "What kind of charges?" Rebecca asked. "We're recommending that he be terminated immediately, and that criminal charges be filed for sexual harassment, assault, and abuse of power. We're also recommending that Mr. Kramer be terminated for his failure to properly investigate and address the complaints against Mr. Thompson." Rebecca felt a sense of justice at hearing this news. What about the other employees who were affected? We're working with each of them individually to address their concerns and provide appropriate compensation for what they experienced. We're also implementing new policies and procedures to prevent this type of behavior in the future. 2 weeks later, Rebecca read in the local newspaper that Marcus Thompson had been arrested and charged with multiple counts of sexual harassment and assault. The article mentioned that he had been targeting female employees at his workplace and using his position of authority to intimidate and abuse them. The article also mentioned that Harold Kramer had been fired from his position as property manager for failing to properly investigate complaints against Marcus. Rebecca felt a deep sense of satisfaction as she read the article. Justice had been served, and Marcus would finally face consequences for his actions. But more importantly, the other women who had been victimized by Marcus would finally have their experiences validated and acknowledged. A month later, Rebecca was working her usual shift when she was approached by a woman she didn't recognize. The woman was well-dressed and appeared to be in her 40s. "Excuse me, are you Rebecca Martinez?" the woman asked. "Yes, I am. My name is Dr. Sarah Wilson. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I specialize in workplace trauma and harassment. I wanted to thank you for what you did." Rebecca looked puzzled. "I'm sorry, I don't understand." "I've been working with several of the women who were affected by Marcus Thompson's behavior. They've all mentioned you, and how your courage in coming forward gave them the strength to speak up about their own experiences." Rebecca felt a warmth spread through her chest. "I just did what I thought was right." "What you did was extraordinary. You took on a powerful man who was abusing his authority, and you did it knowing that you might face retaliation. That takes incredible courage." Dr. Wilson paused for a moment, then continued, "I want you to know that your actions have had a ripple effect. The women I've been working with are healing, and they're finding their voices again. Some of them are speaking up about other situations where they've been mistreated. Your courage has inspired them to advocate for themselves." Rebecca felt tears forming in her eyes. "That means more to me than you know. There's something else I wanted to tell you. The company has asked me to develop a training program for employees about recognizing and reporting harassment. I've been asked to use your case as an example of how to properly respond to these situations." Rebecca was honored by this request. "I'd be happy to help with that." "Excellent. I think your story could help a lot of people." As Dr. Wilson walked away, Rebecca returned to her work with a renewed sense of purpose. She had always known that her military service had prepared her for challenges, but she had never imagined that her biggest battle would be fought in an office building against a corrupt security guard. But she had won that battle, and in doing so, She had helped other women find their own strength and courage. That was something she could be proud of for the rest of her life. 6 months later, Rebecca received a letter from Prestige Properties offering her a promotion to supervisor of the cleaning staff. The letter acknowledged her professionalism, her integrity, and her courage in coming forward about Marcus Thompson's behavior. Rebecca accepted the promotion, not because she wanted more responsibility or money, but because she wanted to make sure that the women who worked under her would always have someone they could trust to protect them. On her first day as supervisor, Rebecca gathered her team together for a meeting. The group included Carmen Rodriguez and several other women who had been victimized by Marcus Thompson. "I want you all to know that things are going to be different now," Rebecca told them. "You're going to be treated with respect and dignity. You're going to be valued for your work and your contributions. And if anyone ever tries to intimidate or harass you, you come to me immediately. I will always have your back." Carmen Rodriguez raised her hand tentatively. What if the person causing trouble is someone in authority? Rebecca smiled. "Then we go over their head. And if that doesn't work, we go over that person's head. And we keep going until we find someone who will listen and take action." The room was quiet for a moment, then Carmen spoke again. "You know, I've been working cleaning jobs for 20 years, and I've never had a supervisor talk to us like this. Like we matter." "You do matter," Rebecca said firmly. "Every single one of you matters. The work you do keeps this building running, and the people who work here depend on you. Don't ever let anyone make you feel like you're invisible or disposable." As the meeting concluded, Rebecca felt a sense of fulfillment that she had never experienced before. She had found her calling, not in combat or in some high-profile career, but in protecting and advocating for people who needed someone to stand up for them. Over the following months, Rebecca worked to transform the culture of the cleaning staff. She implemented new policies that ensured fair treatment and proper documentation of any disciplinary actions. She established regular meetings where employees could voice concerns without fear of retaliation. She also worked with the building's new security team to establish proper protocols for any future investigations. The new security supervisor, Janet Mitchell, was a former police officer who had extensive training in workplace harassment and proper investigative procedures. She and Rebecca worked together to create a safe environment for all employees. "You know," Janet said to Rebecca one day, "I've reviewed all the security footage from the Marcus Thompson era, and I have to say, I'm impressed by how you handled yourself. You never lost your composure, even when he was clearly trying to intimidate you." Rebecca shrugged. "I learned a long time ago that bullies are usually cowards. They pick on people they think can't fight back. Once Marcus realized I wasn't going to be intimidated, He didn't know what to do. Still, it took courage to come forward. A lot of people would have just tried to avoid him and hoped the problem would go away. That's exactly why the problem persisted for so long, Rebecca replied. Marcus counted on people being too afraid to speak up. He created a culture of fear and intimidation because it allowed him to get away with his behavior. Janet nodded thoughtfully. I've been thinking about that. How do we make sure something like this never happens again? Rebecca had been thinking about the same question. We need to create a culture where reporting inappropriate behavior is seen as protecting the team, not causing trouble. We need to make sure that every employee knows their rights and knows that they have support if they need to file a complaint. That's a great idea. Maybe we could develop some kind of training program. Rebecca smiled. Actually, I've been working on something like that with Dr. Wilson. We're developing a presentation that we can give to all employees about recognizing harassment and knowing how to report it. The training program that Rebecca and Dr. Wilson developed became a model for other companies. It focused on empowering employees to speak up about inappropriate behavior and providing them with clear steps for reporting violations. The program also emphasized the importance of supporting colleagues who come forward with complaints. 1 year after the Marcus Thompson incident, Rebecca was asked to speak at a conference for building management companies about workplace safety and employee rights. She stood before an audience of hundreds of property managers, security supervisors, and HR professionals. When I first started working as a night janitor, Rebecca began, I thought my job was to clean offices and empty trash cans. I thought I was invisible, that no one noticed me or cared about what happened to me. I was wrong. She told her story describing Marcus's behavior, the fear she had felt, and the decision she had made to come forward. She talked about the investigation, the support she had received from the company, and the changes that had been implemented as a result. The most important thing I learned, Rebecca concluded, is that every employee has value and deserves to be treated with respect. It doesn't matter if you're the CEO or the night janitor. It doesn't matter if you're a citizen or an immigrant. It doesn't matter if you're young or old, male or female. Everyone deserves to work in an environment free from harassment and intimidation. The audience gave her a standing ovation, and afterward, several people approached her to share their own stories and to ask for advice about implementing similar programs in their own companies. One woman, a property manager from Denver, was particularly moved by Rebecca's story. I think we might have a Marcus Thompson in our building, she said quietly. Several women have made comments about our security supervisor, but no one has filed a formal complaint. After hearing your story, I realize I need to investigate this more thoroughly. Rebecca gave the woman Dr. Wilson's contact information and encouraged her to reach out for guidance on how to handle the situation properly. "Don't wait," Rebecca warned. "The longer you wait, the more women will be victimized." 2 years after the incident, Rebecca received an unexpected phone call. It was Marcus Thompson. "Martinez, I need to talk to you," he said, his voice lacking the aggressive tone she remembered. Rebecca's first instinct was to hang up, but something in his voice made her pause. "What do you want, Marcus?" "I want to apologize. I know it's too late, and I know it doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know that I'm sorry for what I did to you and the other women." Rebecca was silent for a long moment. "Why are you calling me now?" "I've been in therapy since the arrest. I've been working on understanding why I did what I did. My therapist says I need to take responsibility for my actions and make amends where possible." "And you think a phone call makes amends?" Marcus sighed. "No, I don't. I know I can't undo what I did, but I wanted you to know that I understand now how wrong I was. I abused my position of power, and I hurt people who were just trying to do their jobs." Rebecca felt a mixture of emotions. Part of her was angry that Marcus thought a simple apology could somehow make up for what he had done. But another part of her was glad to hear that he was finally taking responsibility for his actions. "Marcus, I appreciate that you're trying to make amends, but the person you really need to apologize to is yourself. You need to figure out how to live with what you did and how to make sure you never do anything like it again." "I know, I'm working on that." "Good, and Marcus, don't ever contact me again. I've moved on with my life and I don't need reminders of what happened." Rebecca hung up the phone and sat quietly for a moment. She realized that she felt nothing for Marcus Thompson. No anger, no hatred, no desire for revenge. He had become irrelevant to her life, a footnote in a story that had ultimately made her stronger and more purposeful. 3 years after the incident, Rebecca was offered a position as Director of Employee Relations for Prestige Properties. The job would involve overseeing employee complaints, conducting investigations, and developing policies to prevent harassment and discrimination. "I have to be honest with you," Rebecca told the hearing manager during her interview. "I don't have a college degree. I don't have formal training in HR or employee relations. What I have is experience with what it's like to be on the receiving end of workplace harassment, and I have experience with standing up to people who abuse their power." The hearing manager, a woman named Patricia Lopez, smiled. "Ms. Martinez, those are exactly the qualifications we're looking for. We don't need someone who can recite corporate policies. We need someone who understands what it's like to be vulnerable in the workplace and who has the courage to fight for people who can't fight for themselves." Rebecca accepted the position, and in her new role, she implemented comprehensive training programs, established clear reporting procedures, and created a culture where employees felt safe coming forward with complaints. One of her first major cases involved a property manager who had been sexually harassing female tenants. The women were afraid to report the harassment because they feared eviction or other forms of retaliation. Rebecca worked with the legal team to build a case against the property manager, and she personally met with each of the affected women to assure them that they would be protected from retaliation. The property manager was terminated, and the company implemented new policies to prevent similar incidents in the future. You know, one of the women told Rebecca after the case was resolved, "I never thought anyone would believe me. I thought I would just have to put up with it because I needed a place to live." "No one should have to put up with harassment," Rebecca replied. "Not in the workplace, not in their home, not anywhere. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect." 5 years after the Marcus Thompson incident, Rebecca was invited to speak at a congressional hearing on workplace harassment. She sat at a table facing a panel of senators and representatives, with cameras recording her every word. "Ms. Martinez," the committee chairwoman began, "you've become something of a symbol for workers who have been harassed or abused in the workplace. Can you tell us what you think needs to be done to protect vulnerable employees?" Rebecca leaned forward slightly. "Senator, I think the most important thing is to create a culture where reporting harassment is seen as protecting the workplace, not causing trouble. Too many people stay silent because they're afraid of losing their jobs or facing retaliation. And how do we create that culture? We start by making sure that every employee knows their rights. We provide clear, accessible reporting procedures. We investigate every complaint thoroughly and fairly. And we make sure that there are real consequences for people who abuse their power." One of the senators asked, "Ms. Martinez, you mentioned that you're a military veteran. Do you think your military background helped you in your situation?" Rebecca considered the question carefully. "Yes and no, Senator. My military training taught me to stand up to bullies and to protect people who can't protect themselves. But the principles I used aren't unique to military service. They're basic human principles: courage, integrity, and the willingness to do what's right even when it's difficult." What would you say to someone who is currently experiencing harassment but is afraid to report it? Rebecca looked directly into the camera. "I would say that you're not alone. There are people who will support you and protect you. Your voice matters and your experience matters. Don't let anyone convince you that you have to suffer in silence." After the hearing, Rebecca received hundreds of emails from people who had seen her testimony. Many of them shared their own stories of workplace harassment, and many of them thanked her for giving them the courage to speak up. One email particularly moved her. It was from a young woman named Ashley who worked as a receptionist at a law firm. Ashley wrote that she had been sexually harassed by one of the partners for months, but she had been afraid to report it because she was a single mother and couldn't afford to lose her job. After seeing your testimony, Ashley wrote, I realized that I was teaching my daughter that it's okay for men to treat women badly as long as they have power over them. I couldn't live with that. I reported the harassment to the State Bar Association, and they're investigating. I might lose my job, but I'll be able to look at my daughter and tell her that I stood up for myself. Rebecca wrote back to Ashley, providing her with resources and support, and offering to help in any way she could. She also shared Ashley's story with permission in future presentations, demonstrating how courage could inspire others to take action. 10 years after the Marcus Thompson incident, Rebecca was recognized by the Department of Labor for her work in combating workplace harassment. She had helped dozens of companies develop better policies and procedures, and she had personally handled hundreds of harassment cases. At the awards ceremony, Rebecca was introduced as a woman who transformed a personal trauma into a mission to protect others. As she walked to the podium to accept the award, she thought about all the women who had been helped by her work, and all the women who would be helped in the future. When I first encountered workplace harassment, Rebecca said in her acceptance speech, I thought I was just one person fighting against a system that didn't care about people like me. I was wrong. There are millions of people who care about creating fair and safe workplaces. There are millions of people who believe that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. She paused, looking out at the audience of labor officials, employee advocates, and fellow harassment survivors. The most important thing I've learned is that change doesn't happen all at once. It happens one person at a time, one workplace at a time, one story at a time. Every time someone finds the courage to speak up, they make it easier for the next person to do the same. After the ceremony, Rebecca was approached by a young man who introduced himself as David Chen, a recent law school graduate who specialized in employment law. Ms. Martinez, David said, I've been following your work for years. I actually wrote my law school thesis on the impact of your case on workplace harassment law. I wanted to thank you for inspiring me to pursue this field. Rebecca smiled. What are you planning to do with your law degree? I'm going to work for a nonprofit that provides legal services to low-income workers who have been harassed or discriminated against. I want to help people who don't have the resources to hire expensive lawyers. That's wonderful. Those are the people who need the most help. David hesitated for a moment, then continued. I have to ask you something. Do you ever regret coming forward? Do you ever wish you had just kept quiet and avoided all the attention?" Rebecca considered the question. It was something she had been asked many times over the years, and her answer had evolved as she had grown and learned from her experiences. "David, I won't lie to you. There were times when I wondered if I had made the right choice. There were times when the attention was overwhelming, when the legal proceedings were stressful, when I just wanted to go back to being invisible. But every time I met someone who had been helped by my story, every time I saw a company change its policies because of the work we were doing, I knew that I had made the right choice." She paused, thinking about Carmen Rodriguez, who had become a good friend and who now worked as a trainer for the company's harassment prevention program. "But you know what I regret most," Rebecca continued. "I regret that it took someone with my background to finally stand up to Marcus Thompson. I regret that Carmen Rodriguez and the other women who were victimized before me felt like they couldn't speak up. I regret that we live in a society where people feel like they have to choose between their dignity and their livelihood." David nodded solemnly. "That's why I want to do this work, to make sure that people don't have to make that choice." "Then you're going to do important work, David. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." 15 years after the Marcus Thompson incident, Rebecca received an invitation that surprised her. It was from the United States Marine Corps, asking her to speak at a leadership conference for officers about the principles of protecting those under their command. Rebecca had maintained her connection to the Marines through veteran organizations, but she had never spoken about her civilian experiences to military audiences. The invitation intrigued her because it suggested that the military was recognizing the connection between military leadership principles and civilian workplace issues. At the conference, Rebecca stood before an audience of Marine officers from lieutenant to general. Many of them had combat experience, and all of them understood the importance of taking care of their troops. "When I left the Marine Corps," Rebecca began, "I thought I was done with the mission of protecting people. I thought I was moving into a civilian world where those principles didn't apply. I was wrong." She told her story, emphasizing the parallels between military leadership and civilian workplace responsibility. She talked about the importance of creating a culture where people felt safe to report problems, where leaders took responsibility for the welfare of their subordinates, and where there were consequences for those who abused their power. "The principles we learned in the Marines," Rebecca said, "don't stop applying when we take off the uniform. Whether you're leading Marines in combat or managing employees in an office building, you have a responsibility to protect the people under your command." After her presentation, a young captain approached her. "Ma'am, I'm about to leave the Marine Corps and start working in corporate security. Your story has given me a lot to think about. What do you mean? I mean that I need to make sure I'm part of the solution, not part of the problem. I need to make sure that I'm protecting people, not intimidating them. Rebecca smiled. That's exactly the right attitude. Remember, real strength comes from protecting those who are vulnerable, not from preying on them. 20 years after the Marcus Thompson incident, Rebecca was asked to write a book about her experiences. The publisher wanted her to focus on the harassment incident and the legal proceedings that followed, but Rebecca had a different vision. I don't want to write a book about being a victim, she told her editor. I want to write a book about finding your voice and using it to protect others. I want to write about the importance of standing up for people who can't stand up for themselves. The book, titled Standing Ground, A Marine's Guide to Workplace Courage, became a bestseller and was used in leadership training programs across the country. It combined Rebecca's personal story with practical advice about recognizing harassment, reporting violations, and creating safe workplace cultures. One of the most popular chapters was titled "The Tattoo That Changed Everything." In it, Rebecca reflected on the moment when Marcus Thompson saw her Marine tattoo and realized that he had targeted the wrong person. "The tattoo didn't make me brave," she wrote. "The courage was already there, developed through years of military service and personal growth. The tattoo simply revealed to Marcus that he had misjudged me. But the real power came from the realization that I didn't have to be a victim. I could choose to fight back, and I could choose to protect others." The book's success led to speaking engagements around the world, and Rebecca found herself traveling to corporations, universities, and government agencies to share her message about workplace courage and leadership. At one event, a young woman approached her afterward with tears in her eyes. "Ms. Martinez, I've been sexually harassed by my supervisor for 2 years. I've been afraid to report it because I'm on a work visa, and I thought I would be deported if I caused trouble. But after hearing your story, I realize I can't let fear control my life." Rebecca spent an hour talking with the woman, providing her with resources and support, and helping her develop a plan for reporting the harassment safely. 6 months later, Rebecca received a letter from the woman thanking her for the encouragement and reporting that the harassment had stopped and her supervisor had been disciplined. "You changed my life," the woman wrote, "not just by giving me the courage to speak up, but by showing me that I have value and that I deserve to be treated with respect." 25 years after the Marcus Thompson incident, Rebecca was inducted into the Women's Hall of Fame for her work in combating workplace harassment. At the ceremony, she was introduced by Carmen Rodriguez, who had become a successful trainer and consultant in her own right. "When I first met Rebecca Martinez," Carmen said, I was a frightened woman who had been victimized by someone in power. I felt helpless and alone. Rebecca showed me that I wasn't alone, and she taught me that I had the power to stand up for myself and for others. Carmen paused, looking out at the audience of accomplished women. But more than that, Rebecca taught me that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. It's about protecting people who are vulnerable, even when it's difficult or dangerous. As Rebecca accepted the award, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. It had started with a simple tattoo and a corrupt security guard, but it had evolved into a life's mission of protecting and empowering others. I want to leave you with one thought, Rebecca said in her acceptance speech. Every day, each of us has the opportunity to make a choice. We can choose to be silent when we see injustice, or we can choose to speak up. We can choose to look the other way when someone is being mistreated, or we can choose to intervene. We can choose to be part of the problem, or we can choose to be part of the solution. She looked out at the audience, seeing faces of women who had overcome their own challenges and had gone on to make a difference in the world. I chose to speak up, not because I was brave, but because I realized that my silence was allowing other women to be victimized. I chose to fight back, not because I was strong, but because I knew that someone had to stand up to bullies who prey on vulnerable people. Rebecca paused, thinking about all the women who had been helped by her work, and all the women who would be helped in the future by the people in the audience. The most important thing I've learned is that change happens when ordinary people choose to do extraordinary things. It happens when someone decides that they can't live with injustice anymore. It happens when someone realizes that they have the power to make a difference. As she concluded her speech, Rebecca looked out at the audience and saw the faces of women who understood the power of speaking up, the importance of standing together, and the courage required to fight for what is right. You all have that power, she said. Use it wisely. Use it courageously. Use it to protect those who cannot protect themselves. The audience rose to their feet in applause, and Rebecca felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She had taken a moment of personal trauma and transformed it into a lifetime of service to others. She had shown that one person's courage could inspire others to find their own strength. As she walked off the stage, Rebecca thought about the tattoo on her shoulder that had started it all. It had been intended as a simple tribute to her military service, but it had become something much more significant. It had become a symbol of the strength that comes from standing up for what is right, regardless of the consequences. And in the end, that was the most important lesson of all. True strength doesn't come from intimidating others or abusing power. It comes from protecting those who are vulnerable, standing up for justice, and using whatever talents and resources you have to make the world a better place. Rebecca Martinez had learned that lesson in the most difficult way possible, but she had used it to change countless lives for the better. And that, she knew, was what real courage looked like.